For 3 days, God has visited his people. God has visited his people. I say God has visited his people as I think of all we have experienced. Men and women who never meet saw each other. What a mystery is contained in the verb to see. Because a person is already a mystery. They did not only see each other, but they also came together. They talked. They listened to each other.
From the 11th to the 13th of September 2005, in the ancient city of Lyon in France, an extraordinary event took place in the presence of thousands of spectators. The Sant Egidio Community, which originated in Italy, started up this event bringing together 300 representatives from all the world religions for 3 days to pray, to listen to each other, to talk, engage in frank dialogue, and build together a humanism capable of bringing peace between peoples and individuals.
As men and women from different religions, we are convinced that without peace, our world becomes inhuman. We have heard the cry of all those who suffer because of war and terrorism. Human life is sacred. The world is tired of living in fear. The religions do not want violence, war, terrorism. We say with determination to all men, we have prayed for peace in the world.
In the name of God, peace, for the Muslim, comes from his faith. He believes that God himself is peace, and he calls us all to peace. I believe that unity is achievable between religions if these religions return to their source. It is the meaning of Islam. Islam that calls for fraternity and to abandon oneself into the hands of God and peace.
On the 6th of August 1945, at 8:15, the city of Hiroshima experienced for the first time in history the devastation caused by an atomic bomb. The city was reduced to ashes. The war, it is killing other men. This is why we are against all war. As religious men, we must continue to oppose the war.
Hand in hand with all the religions, we want to bring peace to the world, establish heaven on earth in our world. This is our final aim.
We thank God who allowed us to exist. This is the first thing. Next, we ask for forgiveness for our sins each day. Then we forgive each other. With such an attitude, we can build peace in our hearts.
We know that God has given the world a fabulous tool. It is peace. If we do not have peace, we have nothing. Therefore, it is good to recall this prayer where we ask God to spread the wings of peace over all men.
How can we have peace in the world if we do not have peace among Christians? As children of God, we must make peace among us, that we be reconciled to one another, that we manifest our faithfulness to God, who asks us to live in peace with everybody. This is the great responsibility of Christians for peace in the world. The world can change. It can be more human, more peaceful. We do not give up, because faith lights up our hope, supports our weaknesses, lights up our heart with fire. The world needs hearts full of faith. A world that is more human is not a world without spirituality, without faith.
These bonds that have been woven, these friendships in diversity, are a sign, a pointer for our time. For us in the NetforGod prayer network, in our work for the unity of Christians and peace in the world, we have to listen to the message left by this extraordinary event. How is it that today there are men and women from all Christian denominations, from all the religions of the world, meeting, uniting, and moving forward together for peace? What is the secret of this call? What is at the source of the vocation of the Sant Egidio Community, the organiser of this huge meeting? Andrea Riccardi, founder in charge of the community, talks to us about it.
I can remember it was in 1968. In France, it was the same as in Italy, Germany, and the United States. It was a time of revolution for the youth. There was a spirit of revolt. This was the setting, and we were a group of young people in a Roman college in Rome.
à vivre cet esprit 68. On voulait faire quelque chose. Mais on voyait que la politique, c'était tout politique. Et dans la politique, il y avait une ambiguïté. Changer le monde, la révolution. Mais très bien. Mais on voyait que le rapport entre les soi-disant gens révolutionnaires, c'était des rapports mauvais.
So we began to think, we must change man, but how do we change man? But who can change man?
Mais qui peut changer l'homme? Et nos yeux
And we
sont
came
tombés
across
sur la
the
page
page in the Gospel of Jesus, the Gospel of Matthew. I remember the end of chapter 9, the miracles of Jesus and the poor. And as we began to read the Gospel, we told ourselves, where does this Gospel lead us? We have to read it, but what must we do? How do we respond? We began to respond by praying in the street, prayer like that, prayer of young people, a prayer in the home. But after that, where does the Gospel lead us? It leads us to the poor, the villages of Rome, the poor in the suburbs, the slums. These are the origins of Sant Egidio, the Gospel and prayer for the poor.
Et les pauvres comme amis.
So, in 1968, Rome was a little bit like a third world city. We got to know poor families. We began teaching literacy. And after we had discovered the poor of Rome, the tramps, the elderly, the drug addicts, the handicapped, and we discovered the poor of the world. That is our story. From Rome to the whole world. That is our discovery. The Gospel saved us from ideology, from the prison of ideology, and gave us a taste for the primacy of man and women, and particularly the poor. In order to experience Sant Egidio, it is not difficult. We must be brothers and sisters. We must pray. We must love the poor.
Daniela Pompei is responsible for immigration services in the Sant Egidio Community. Every Tuesday afternoon, she comes to this place here to help people who have problems, recently arrived immigrants.
Ero liceale, 15-16 anni, diciamo.
At the age of about 15 or 16, I went to college. At that time, I had moved away from the church. I no longer went to church. I reacted like a lot of young people today. But at school, I got to know some people from the Sant Egidio community who talked to me about the poor areas in the town next to where I lived, people who were poorer than me. It was not at all recommended for women to go to these areas because they were unpopular and difficult. I went there and I was particularly moved by the relations with the children who were poorer than me, Italian children at that time. So I started by helping the poorest people and gradually came to understand the gospel in a different way. Over the years, I realized that the gospel was inviting me to serve the poor, and this was a way of serving Jesus.
Va bene, facciamo così, allora un pochino di tempo ce l'abbiamo, appena io ho qualche notizia, diciamo così, tanto tu ritorni. La cosa essenziale è rimanere legati al Vangelo.
The most important thing is to remain close to the gospel and to pray. Without the gospel, without the love of the gospel and the love of prayer, it's very difficult to keep going over so many years. Jesus said, "Whatever you do for the least of my brothers here, you do it unto me."
Quand je prends cette parabole de l'évangile de Matthieu,
When I think about this parable from chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel, I think that for us as Christians it is very important. The poor could become our masters. When you hold the light of the world of God in your hand, never avoid the poor. The poor will be our masters. I really think that the poor are like a sacrament. Jesus is in those who are poor.
Jésus est dans les pauvres.
Francesca Zuccari is in charge of the service to the poor in the community. 3 times a week, this restaurant, the Mensa, which is right in the heart of the city of Rome, gives a hot meal to 1,500 people who have been forgotten by society. Through the community, I've come to know the world of poverty, and especially what the gospel has to say to this world, the good news for these stricken people. This restaurant has been here for 15 years and its doors are open to everyone. Our desire is that anyone who comes here will feel as though they're at home. We want to meet each one of them, to get to know their names, their story, and to be able to help them to improve their lives. They are family. This is the family of God, and they are our brothers. The Mensa comprises lots of different people. There are Italians who come here, young and old, people with quite difficult backgrounds, and there are also lots of foreigners, more than 100 different nationalities, and people of different religions, Christians from different churches. It shows that it is possible to live as different nationalities when the desire to talk and to get to know one another and to respect one another unites us. This is a fundamental dialogue, a dialogue between religions, an ecumenical dialogue between the poor who are experiencing difficulties. For us it's a great blessing because it demonstrates that all things are possible at all levels. At Christmas, this daily act of friendship becomes a very beautiful feast. We make a meal here in La Mensa and also in the church of Santa Maria in Trastevere, where the community of Sant Egidio prays in Rome. But it's very important to do things together. We have to know that every little act, if it's done in love, is something great. It's a treasure which multiplies because it's the love of God. I think that this is the meaning of my life. They give me the chance to do something for others, and doing this with other people. It's an adventure that started a few years ago, and I want it to go on for the rest of my life.
Our work for peace is a work that started with the poor, poverty that came out of war. War is the mother of poverty, and poverty is the mother of war, because there is a link. So our work for peace in the world is particularly for peace where there is war and poverty side by side.
C'est la paix partout. C'est la paix surtout dans les situations de guerre et de pauvreté.
So, since the 1980s, Sant Egidio has been led through its solidarity and working with the poor of the world, and through creating an international network of friends, to become a mediator for peace in numerous conflicts around the world. In October 1992, a peace treaty was signed in Rome at Sant Egidio, which put an end to civil war in Mozambique between the government of Frelimo, in power since independence, and the guerrilla movement. This conflict had been going on for 16 years and led to 1 million deaths, over 1 million overseas refugees, and 4 million people displaced in the country itself, to say nothing of the devastation to the infrastructure and the economy.
Our stake in Mozambique was to make people work for peace. And we discovered that men, women and young people who pray, could make peace happen. In suffering, we Christians possess a power of peace. We had meetings for peace at Sant Egidio for 2.5 years, where we talked. There was France, the United States, Italy, the United Nations, and there were 2 delegations, the government and the guerrillas. We negotiated just like any international negotiation. They were a bit desperate, and they began to understand that war wasn't bringing peace between them. We gained their trust. We talked for hours. We began by speaking to one another, and then our only weapon to gain peace was not dollars, but the word, each to his own method. Being united as Christians for peace is very important. The Patriarch Constantinople, Athenagoras, said, "Sister churches, brother people." How many spirits and demons of hatred and violence and war have slipped through the cracks and divisions among Christians? Being united in praying for peace is vital, because our strength as Christians is to be able to say that we believe in peace, even when there is a war on. When a community celebrates a Eucharist during a war, this is already a victory for peace. And when we pray for peace, we believe in peace. I'm going to give myself a bit of publicity now. I've written a book called Preventative Peace. In other words, Christians have peace before war, during war, and after war.
On the 27th October 1986, for the first time in history, a Pope, John Paul, invited all the leaders of the world's religions to Assisi, to the hill of St. Francis.
It was his own idea, and it was something really quite personal. Cardinal Etchegari had a role in organizing this meeting in Assisi. It's true. It was a grace and a privilege to witness this. I think this was a truly historic day. Unique, I would say. A first in any case in the history of the Church and the world. That Pope Paul had dared to invite these people as a brother among brothers, no more, not as the Pope, and the way he behaved at Assisi was to show that he was not above them, but a part of these other leaders of religions. What struck me the most that day, because we were there to pray, it was a very grey day. It was raining in the morning. And at the end of the morning, suddenly, we saw in the sky above Assisi a wonderful rainbow. And this rainbow reminded everyone there of the first rainbow that the Bible speaks of, which appeared above Noah's Ark. And then we felt as though we were all descendants of Noah. I mean, we were all descendants of the people that God had made his covenant with. And whether we were Catholics or not, Christians or not, coming from every corner of humanity all over the world, we really felt like we belonged to the same family, the family of the one God. Since then, the Pope has coined the phrase, the Spirit of Assisi, which means that we should never forget what we have experienced that day at Assisi. So the Spirit of Assisi is simply not forgetting that without prayer we will never have peace. And then, of course, there's the word Assisi itself. It's not just simply the Spirit of God. There is the Poverello as well. There is Francis and his sister Claire. The Spirit of Assisi is showing that we must live like Francis of Assisi lived the Gospel, in an even more radical way, as simply and as profoundly as possible. I would like to give a personal witness. I realized that I ought to pray for people I have never met. Yet, I thought that I had a Catholic heart, in other words, a universal heart, and then I realized that this was not so in my case, and I needed to change immediately, without hesitation.
This month we recommend praying for the community of Sant Egidio. Also to pray together that God may grant us the Spirit of Assisi so as to love the poor and work for peace there where we live. The text for this month is in Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me.